when you communicate in unconscious, unskillful, and hurtful ways, this type of communication negatively affects the recipient of your communication, yourself, and the relationship.
I don't like to argue, so I say nothing and fume for days.
How do I set boundaries without sounding like a jerk?
I hate the idea that I might accidentally offend somebody, so sometimes I'd just rather say nothing at all.
Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, and thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra Siroka, a transformative communication teacher and coach who's devoted to helping multicultural individuals and couples on the path of transformation transform their lives and relationships through conscious communication. Thank you so much for joining me today in this 15-minute transformative communication podcast workshop. If you've been listening to the Language Alchemy Podcast every week, then you know that in the most recent episodes, we've been talking about the impact of our communication. If you haven't listened to those episodes, just know that in episode 131, we talked about our communication having an impact and also how to notice the impact that our language and behaviors have on others. Then, in episode 132, I shared the reasons why you probably aren't the communicator you think you are, and offered you a list of communication habits that have a negative impact. Today, we are going to talk about the real consequences of our negative communication impact. More specifically, we'll dive into who is negatively affected when our communication is unconscious, unskillful, or hurtful. Let's start with some examples. Let's say that you are a parent who would like your kids to come talk to you, to tell you about their lives, to confide in you. And if you're not a parent, don't worry. As you listen to this part, substitute the word parent with partner, friend, work colleague, and substitute the word kids with whoever you would like. Spouse, sibling, etc. Now, you think you're pretty open-minded and accepting. You even tell your kids or the other person that your mind is always open to them, to their ideas, their emotions, their experiences. That your ears are always ready to listen to them. That you're a safe person. And you even literally use words like, you can talk to me about anything. You can tell me anything about what's going on with you. You can come to me. And even though you say these lovely words, when your kids tell you they did something that's not in alignment with your values, like they skipped school or they cheated on a test, and you immediately respond with, "What? How could you do that? You should know better," then your kids will be negatively affected. And of course, I'm not making an excuse here for the act of skipping school or cheating on tests. I'm not saying congratulate your kid or the other person when they tell you they did something that's against their or your values. I'm saying that when your immediate response is to judge, criticize, or shame the other person, the person who's receiving your unskillful or hurtful communication will be affected negatively. And if you keep communicating in ways that have a negative impact, then your kid or that other person will feel unsafe with you. Not only to go to you when they made a mistake or they did something that they feel embarrassed about, but also when they had any kind of deep experience, even experiences of joy. Let me give you another example. Let's say your coworker has gathered the courage to tell you that they're not okay with certain comments you've made about people of color in the office. Your colleague tells you these comments are hurtful to people. And you respond with, "I'm just being funny. I'm just teasing. They aren't bothered by my humor. Nobody says anything to me. You have such thin skin." Well, if this is your immediate response, then it's obvious that your coworker is going to be negatively impacted. It is evident that when your communication has a negative impact, the other person, the recipient of your words or behaviors, will be the one who's negatively affected. The other, the person who receives our unskillful, unconscious, or hurtful communication, is not the only one who's going to be negatively affected. No, you will also suffer the negative consequence of your unskillful, unconscious, or hurtful communication. How? Well, imagine that you would like to have a deeper sense of connection with your romantic partner. And again, if you do not have a romantic partner, substitute romantic partner with someone else, a family member, a coworker, a friend. When your romantic partner, with whom you'd like to have a deeper and meaningful relationship, shares with you something important about their life, maybe they tell you something intimate about their childhood, or they share their concerns about someone they deeply care about. If you immediately respond with language that minimizes their experience, such as, I don't think that's such a big deal, everybody has a hard time. You were just a kid, you didn't know any better. Then this kind of unconscious, unskillful, hurtful communication will not only impact the other person, it will also have a negative impact on you. Why? Because the other person may feel offended or hurt, and so they may get defensive. And they may say something like, it is a big deal. How can you not care? What's the problem with you? Or they may even use offensive language towards you. Or if they are more conscious with their communication, they may tell you that they don't feel heard, understood, or seen by you. In the second example I gave you earlier, making hurtful or racist comments about people of color at work, someone could report you to HR and you may lose your job. Or maybe they don't say anything, but they don't invite you to out-of-work events. They don't choose you to collaborate with them in a project you'd love to be a part of. Or they don't offer their help when you have too much work on your plate. When you consistently communicate in unconscious, unskillful, and hurtful ways, when you do or say any of the things I listed in episode 132, the other person will be negatively affected, and so will you. And it doesn't end there. There's something else that suffers greatly when you communicate unconsciously, unskillfully, or hurtfully. Say, for example, that you go out to dinner with a dear friend, someone you care about, and you place your cell phone on the table, just like unfortunately so many people do these days. And as you and your friend are chatting and connecting, you get several notifications and pings. Emails, text messages, social media, other apps. And so your eyes are not on your friend. Your eyes keep shifting to look at your phone. If this is a common occurrence when you hang out with your dear friend, then this unconscious and skillful communication can be hurtful, not only to your friend, who may not experience you really care enough about them to pay attention to them, and to you, because you're distracted and this lack of presence is disconnecting for you as well. But there's something else that's going to be negatively impacted. Can you guess what that is? Your relationship. In this case, your friendship. How? Well, maybe you get together less often, or you get together for shorter periods of time, or your conversations are not about deep life experiences anymore, but more about superficial topics. So that friendship that was so important to you, that you said was a meaningful relationship in your life, is negatively impacted, all because of how you communicate. If you've been following me for a while, then you've heard me say that when you transform your communication, you transform your life And when you transform your life, you transform your relationships. On the other side of that truth is that when you communicate unconsciously, unskillfully, or hurtfully, the negative impact is threefold. It affects the person who receives your communication, it affects you, and it affects the relationship. If at this moment you are experiencing that negative impact in your life and in your relationships, then the most honorable thing you can do is to reflect on your communication and choose to do the work to learn to communicate differently in ways that can bring forth more of what's important to you, whether that is love, peace, unity, harmony, equality, or compassion. When you learn communication tools to communicate consciously, skillfully, and compassionately, and authentically, it benefits you, the other person, and the relationship. And if you'd like to start right away, today, yes, as soon as you're done listening to this episode, then take my quiz to find out about your most self-sabotaging communication habit that affects you, others, and your relationships. You can take the quiz by visiting languagealchemy.com/quiz. When you take the quiz, you are going to find out about the most sneaky habit that has a negative impact in your life and relationships. And you are going to receive 3 emails with a free mini video training to learn how to keep this unconscious, unskillful, and hurtful communication habit in check so that you can have the kind of life and relationships you want and deserve. The link for the quiz is languagealchemy.com/quiz. I'll add the link in the show notes. And now let's recap what you've heard. In this episode, I gave you several examples to illustrate that when you communicate in unconscious, unskillful, and hurtful ways, this type of communication negatively affects the recipient of your communication, yourself, and the relationship. I also shared that when you notice you are not having the kind of life or relationships you would like to have, the most beneficial and honorable thing you can do is to reflect on your communication and work to transform it. Because when you transform your communication, you transform your life and your relationships. And to help you, I invited you to take my free quiz to find out about your most self-sabotaging communication habit and get a free mini video training to learn to keep it in check. Thank you so much for listening, and a special thanks to my new clients who started working with me recently and are going through the honorable journey of transforming their communication. Thank you, Anna, David, Flo, Reggie, Heather, and Jessica. Next week, I am going to teach you 4 questions to ask yourself before you speak to avoid having a negative impact with your communication. And one more thing, if you find this episode or the Language Alchemy podcast in general helpful, please take a moment to share it with someone you care about. Until next week, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao. Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.